happy to start out by introducing you.
Great, thanks.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. This is the third day of Buffalo Startup Week and the third event in the people track of Buffalo Startup Week. So I would recommend if you didn't attend the first two people track sessions, they all kind of complement one another pretty nicely. The first was a panel on recruiting and selection, and the second was a discussion about talent strategy, which talks a lot about the role of leadership and managing and retaining your talent, which will go nicely with Jason's talk today on leadership in your startup or business. But I'm very pleased to introduce and have today my friend Jason Pearl presenting on the topic of leadership. I personally have known Jason for a little over a year now, and he is definitely a treasure trove of expertise and wisdom. So I will read through his profile here, but Jason is one of the nation's top emerging sales growth consultants, specializing in scaling technology companies from startup to acquisition. His refreshing, heart-centered approach to life and business has made him a highly sought-after consultant, collaborating with today's fastest-growing companies. And locally, a big success story for him is Mongoose, if you guys have heard of Mongoose. For almost 2 decades, Jason has led businesses of all sizes to get the most out of their management and revenue-generating staff, specifically sales type teams. His secret is focusing on not just dollars generated, but on the people behind the scenes who are producing the results. His signature methodology works to align each person's head, heart, and house, which I'm sure he'll talk about today. Deeply rooted in faith and family, Jason proudly enjoys life with his wife and 2 daughters in Lockport. You can find Jason speaking at conferences. I know he's been doing a lot of that lately, hosting masterminds and leading his family of 4. He also is the creator and host of the Company We Keep podcast, which I am a big fan of, and I would definitely recommend you guys do a Google search now or listen to and subscribe to after this. And there he dives into topics to help everyday business owners and entrepreneurs think differently about growth and success. And they're great, like short little, downloadable pieces of wisdom that I definitely have taken to heart in the past year. And you can find all that on jasonmpearl.com. So welcome, Jason, and thanks so much for doing this.
Appreciate it. It's always weird when you're on the other side of that. I do a lot of like introducing people and reading through that. When it's you, it's always a little awkward. But Thank you for those of you that are joining and even those of you that are probably going to listen in after and listen to this recording. But I'm really excited to be here. I think it's really important, especially when we're talking about Startup Week, and regardless if you're a pre-revenue or post-revenue startup, being able to talk about leadership is a really key, important portion of your business, because although leadership qualities are things that you can be potentially born with in some way, shape, or form, most really good leaders that I know spend a lot of time honing in their skills and learning about people and leadership, and that's kind of no different from my story. So again, Emily gave me an introduction, but I am the president founder of Nacre Consulting. We are a sales and growth agency. We work with companies of all sizes, but we really focus on helping the companies we work with, wherever they're at today, help them increase more revenue, but not like as a shot in the arm, where you can only do that when you use us, but a repeatable, consistent process where we can teach you to look at your business and look at the challenges your business has and kind of translate them into more consistent, repeatable revenue generation. So we've been in business for almost 5 years, have generated well over $50 million in revenue for our clients, and really excited and proud about that as well. I also decided a few years ago to create my own personal brand, which seems to be the cool thing to do these days, but I did it really specifically because Nacre Consulting is a true core consultancy where I deal with post-revenue companies, and jasonmpearl.com is my personal brand website where I can do some additional things outside of the Nacre umbrella, such as like, I do some like problem solving coaching, some short-term coaching, and some long-term coaching for founders, executives, and leaders of all sizes. And then really the reason that I started the Company We Keep podcast is because I wanted to continue to find ways to utilize what I've learned in my life and kind of the challenges that I've had both in business and in life, and how you can translate them into success. So it's been a really fun educational process to have a microphone that you speak into and have a podcast out there, but it's been great to be able to share with everybody. And as Emily said, normally 15-20 minute bite-sized types of episodes. So but as we kind of transition into that, to give it a deeper reason of what I do in my background. So one of the core reasons that I have really taken a liking to the business as a whole is I was the kid that grew up in an entrepreneurial household. Back when I was growing up, it wasn't cool to say entrepreneur. That was not a word that was used very often. But my parents were entrepreneurs before it was cool to say that you could be entrepreneurs, right? So my parents have ran 6 successful businesses over the course of the past 40 years. And I've been involved in a number of them, but then, also just been able to be a product of an entrepreneurial household, which I think is a benefit because a lot of you, yes, you're entrepreneurs and founders during the day, but you're still entrepreneurs and founders when you go home at night as well. So understanding that balance is key. But I did cut my teeth in corporate banking. I spent the first 11 and a half years of my career with Wells Fargo and for a short period of time, HSBC. So during my 10-year career at Wells Fargo, I had over 300 direct reports. I was a regional manager for them, traveled around to 5 different cities, and it was kind of like a fixer for their underperforming branches. I also spent about 5.5 years with a family-owned privately held financial services company, where I ended up getting some equity in the business and was part owner there. We over 3x the business and saw 5 years of over double-digit growth each year. So significantly grew that. And then obviously the work that I do right now with Naker. So the reason I kind of share this is, I want to kind of at least create a basis of my background and kind of what qualifies me to speak on this conversation, because I think that's important as well. There's a lot of noise that's out there. I've had, 25 plus years experience of being in business, and and then post college it's about 21. So, but businesses that I have been involved with, to kind of give you an idea of the breadth of services and scope that I've had, is I've done everything from B2B, B2C, privately held family businesses, private equity, venture capital, as well as publicly traded companies. So I share that because I realize that whoever's going to be listening to this, you may find yourself in one of these categories. And so I wanted to kind of just share that my unique perspective comes from these different areas. But as we continue to kind of move on, dealing with Startup Week and talking about helping founders lead the right way, there's a significant amount of responsibility and challenges and expectation that business owners have on their shoulders. Specifically now in this fast moving economy, especially when you look at the startup world, there's so much that's involved in it. So I wanted to kind of just set the record straight and make sure that, I kind of level set with all of you what you're dealing with and what you potentially could be dealing with in the future. And I'm sure that I could probably have 7 or 10 more slides with different bullet points that talk about the issues and the things that you deal with. But right now, as a founder of a startup company, a day in the life could be many different things, right? But you're looking at obviously significant pressure and stress. Anytime you're running your own business, there's obviously that pressure. But certainly there is a decent amount of uncertainty right there now. It depends on the market that you're in, but just the economic uncertainty or the economic volatility that we're dealing with today in the United States and even globally is always something that founders and owners need to consider. Uncertainty could come from market shifts, or it could come from competitors in the marketplace that buy somebody else up, and now you're concerned of if you can compete. There's so many different things that are happening out there that creates a significant amount of uncertainty. Obviously, time constraints is something that we deal with all the time, right? But as a founder, you're pulled in so many different directions that you only have so much time in the day to get things done. You also likely are on some type of a limited budget, even if you're a well-capitalized startup and either you have seed funding or something else like that. Budget is something you always have to consider, and you always have to keep your eye on. So it's something that you obviously deal with. Multiple job functions, obviously you're wearing multiple hats. We know that. Market fluctuations, as we spoke about. But one of the reasons that I was really excited when Emily asked me to do this is that oftentimes founders of startups are really good in a certain area, whether they had a great idea or they have a very unique specific skill set. Um, Lack of experience in leading teams could be a real thing for founders. And it's oftentimes it becomes almost embarrassing to say, well, I don't have experience doing this, or I'm not really sure how to lead my team this way. Because you think like, oh, if I'm the founder, if I'm the CEO of my company, I should have all the answers. And that's just not the case. Nobody should be expected to be able to do everything really, really well. So one of the reasons that I do coaching and one of the reasons I do things like this is because I love having conversations with folks that need more experience or want to shortcut their experience through something that I went through or something one of my clients went through. So lack of experience in leading teams is a real thing. Depending on the structure of your organization, there's also a lot of things you could deal with when it comes to investor or advisor input, right? If you've brought on some additional capital, there could be some investors that you meet with on a per frequency basis, or have some advisors that you're talking to. Those are things that oftentimes really help, but could also complicate your day. And as we talked about, the list could go on. But when you talk about just a few short things of what the day in the life looks like, then there's what's expected of you, right? And as we kind of talked about this of experience or lack of experience, right? You're expected to have really strong leadership skills, be an effective communicator. Normally startups want to grow pretty fast, right? So that's something that's expected of you. Working all hours of the day and night and sacrificing a lot of things that you may enjoy in your life, all in the name of taking your startup to the next level. Not only are you expected to do all those things, but you're supposed to be able to do it with a smile on your face. You're supposed to be able to do it being positive about everything that happens, even when you're getting punched in the face with something you couldn't control, right? You're also asked to be the most knowledgeable in the company because it's your company. You founded it, right? You're running the startup. And you're supposed to have all the answers, right? So I'm sure, again, there's a lot of different things that we could add to this list, but I wanted to just summarize a few of those so we could kind of make sure that we're all on the same page of the things that we deal with on a daily basis. And then there's the good and bad of leadership, right? A really quick Google search is going to be able to show you like what people should say is this is how you lead the right way, and these are the things that are detractors when it comes to leadership. But when you really kind of boil it down, what are some traits of a good leader? It's, first of all, you got to be the chief company cheerleader, right? You need to make sure everybody is rah, is coming in every day, they're getting their coffee and they're ready to go. But you have to be a good listener. You have to also be able to have vision and be a visionary for the company that you set out to run. You have to be honest. You have to be a clear communicator. You should be confident in the decisions that you make, in the way you run your business. Empathy, and you have to be empathetic to what's going on inside your business as well as what your people are dealing with. Certainly have to be trustworthy. Hard work is obviously something that goes without saying, but you also have to be a problem solver, because most of you that are running startups, you certainly know that it's not a straight line, right? Life is not a straight line. But if you really want to complicate that straight line, start a business, and you'll be zigzagging all over the place. And that's part of the fun of it. And that's part of the way you learn, but it's also part of the thing that you have to manage, because one thing that's probably pretty sure when you're running a business is that change is going to be likely, especially new businesses. So those are just a few of the traits that, if you're not focusing on today, are things that you should be considering, thinking about and focusing on. Now we talk about leadership detractors, and kind of some of the things you really don't want to do when it comes to leading your company. This is something that, working with, dozens of businesses over the course of the past 5 years, it's really obvious when you see things that are not right. The most egregious thing that I would say I have seen in business is when you have that kind of like that founder and that leader of the company that is really ego driven and very self-centered. Harvard Business Review just kind of did an article that they posted. I think it was within the last few days, and it was called "Ego is the Enemy of Good Leadership." And I just love that tagline because it's so true. Ego as a whole normally is always bad, right? Whether it's inside of work or outside of work, if you're motivated by your ego, that's normally going to cause some type of issues for you in the long term. Being self-centered too is something, when I say self-centered, I mean it where when you're the founder of a business, obviously there's a lot of eyeballs on you. Yes, you have a lot of stress and all the things that we covered, but when you make your company only about you, and this is my big shot, this is my only bite at the apple, this is my chance to swing the bat, hit a home run, this is all about me, I. Those are things that are going to detract people from wanting to give their all to your business. And being a founder of a startup, you need every person that's on your boat. They need the oar, and they need to be rowing in the same direction that you're rowing, because if not, it's going to make for a real rocky road. And in being ego driven and self-centered, the I's, the me's, the we's, the I's and the me's and not the we's is a big problem. Being inaccessible or too busy is something that is a product of being a leader when there's a lot of things going on, but you have to create space to be accessible to your team. Everybody's busy, no matter what their role is, likely. A founder's no different, but you need to really ensure that you're creating time. And even if that means blocking off space, or I've seen some founders do office hours, right, where they just block out time. And if there's an employee that needs to come in and talk to them about something, they can do that. Whatever the case may be, being inaccessible or too busy is normally going to create significant problems within the organization. Above the law, right? We've probably all in one way, shape, or form at one time of our life worked for a boss that was above the law, right? Like the do what I say, not as I do type of boss. And that's something that we got to be really careful with when we're leading a team of people. If you're setting up rules and there's protocols and there's processes that need to be followed, if you don't follow them as the founder and leader, then you're setting a real bad example, and certainly not something that is going to make it seem like the rest of your team should follow those directions. Being dismissive, obviously, it goes without saying, or demeaning is an issue. Showing your stress all the time is also problematic, right? Because one of the things I've learned, the older I've gotten, the more experience I've got, is that sometimes it's just your facial expressions and your body language that shows stress. And when you're in a startup and you're a founder and you look like you're stressed all the time, that stress is translated to your team. They may not know all the things that you're dealing with and what's making you stressed, but they start to jump to their own conclusions as to why you're stressed. So that's something that you got to be aware of. And then obviously gossiping and being two-faced, like those are all situations where you got to make sure that you avoid those things. And some of these are super basic that everyone knows, but some of them are also really nice reminders. So getting into kind of the meat of what we wanted to talk about today is like, how can I as a founder lead better? Well, in my opinion, it starts with doing deep work individually first. You need to be honest with yourself, and you need to start there. You need to ask yourself a lot of questions, and you need to be critical with yourself as well. I'm a dad of 2 daughters, right? So if I try to teach them something, or if I'm trying to tell them to do something and I'm not doing it myself, it's really hard, right? If I'm trying to tell them that they need to, do something better in their life, but they see me doing the opposite, it doesn't work. So you need to do the individual deep work first, and then you start working on building strong relationships with your partners and your employees. So looking at it from the founder lens, like that's kind of where we start. And, kind of as we move forward, one of the, as far as like the core methodology that I have developed it's kind of slow. My core philosophy has been something that I've developed over the course of the past 20 years, and it's called head, heart, and house. And we're going to dive deeper into this, and I'm going to kind of explain what this means, but I was able to kind of define this and put words around what I have done in my career to see success over the past 20 plus years. And over the past few years, I actually was able to start defining what that means. So my core philosophy of how I manage people and how I deal with business owners and C-level executives and leaders and founders is understanding what's going on in their business. But first, I try to figure out what's going on in their head, what's going on in their heart, and what's happening in their house or in their household, because those are the components that really drive people to make decisions. Now, there are super smart people out there that will get into the psychology of this, and I'm just going to kind of touch on this and do a bit of an overview. But when we talk about doing deep work and leading people well, you actually have to take this philosophy and start with yourself. So when I started my business 5 years ago, I built my business around what I wanted in these three categories, right? What was going on in my head, what was motivating me in my heart, and what was going on in my household. I've talked about my daughters, I'm married, I'm a provider, right? All of those things. So all of these three areas, and then in each individual area, all the things that kind of list out in each one of those areas impact how I make decisions, impact how I lead my business, but also lead my family. So this is something that, again, I put words around and started to develop. So taking this to the next level of talking about the individual deep work that you need to do as a founder of a startup is here, right? So when it's talking about what's going on in your head, we'll start there. Like, it's talking about your approach, right? How do you process information, right? How does your mind work when it comes to processing things? Obviously there's no shortage of personality tests that you can take, right? I just recently took a Hogan assessment. I've done Big Five before. I've done DISC. I've done Enneagram. I've done Myers-Briggs, right? I've done all of these things, and all of them have a little different type of tilt to them. But we all, as individuals, as humans, have a personality type, right? So we need to really fully understand how we're made in that way, and in how we process things, and how we process that information based on our personality in our head. Then there's also our communication style, right? How we prefer to communicate versus how people like to be communicated to. And then there's just kind of the background of like, what is our education and what is our intellect? I have always found that, and maybe this is because I'm not as smart as everybody else, but I like to speak in very clear and plain language, because that's how I'm able to process information quickly. There are some people that are, PhDs, Harvard educated, that use big words, and they have a really complex way of looking at things, and that's completely fine. Again, we're all unique. But for me, I'm educated, but from an intellectual standpoint and from a communication standpoint, I like things in plain, simple language, direct communication, and that makes me feel super comfortable. So as an individual, as a founder, you have to really understand and dig into these areas of who you really are, right? And what's going on in your head. And then transferring over to your heart, this is where some more deep work is done, right? You look at your individuality. Like, who are you? What was your background, right? What were the triggers in your life? What are the positive and negative things that have happened? Why are you where you're at today, right? Some of it is motivation, some of it is circumstance, some of it is just happenstance, luck, right? There's a lot of different things. It's understanding kind of who you are, your background, and then your core makeup, right? Like, when you talk about your heart, you talk about core makeup of things. Like, there are things that motivate me as an individual that are built into my core makeup. For me, obviously, it's I shouldn't say obvious, but for me, like, I'm a faith-driven, man. So that is my core makeup. So the morality of things for me is really, really important in all of my everyday decisions. How I deal with people, how I deal with myself, how I process stress, what's going on, like all those things. What am I passionate about is the next thing. Those are all things that actually are heart postures. So understanding you as an individual and where you're at from a heart posture standpoint is really going to affect how you translate dealing with other people, right? So the heart aspect of things is really individualistic, and goes deep into not who you are today as a founder and who you are today as a business owner, but where you came from and where you're going. And then finally, motivation, right? The house aspect of things. So we talked about head and heart, and then going into the house side of things. This goes into more of your motivation, right? Are you money driven? Are you competitive, right? Do you need flexibility because of things that are going on in your family? What are your personal life needs and motivation, right? Because if, as I've said before in certain podcasts when I talk about this, the house aspect of head, heart, and house is kind of the wild card. Because if you're a founder and you've just dumped all of your resources, all of your time dumped out your savings, maybe borrowed from friends and family and things of that nature. If that starts to be a big concern and financially, even putting food on the table or things like that, that's a wild card, because that creates stress-based actions in the different other areas of head, heart, and house. Maybe you're going to process information differently because you're stressed. So normally you would do it one way, but because there's a significant stress on your household because of what's going on professionally, that's going to change the way you operate in your other two normal core areas. So doing this work and understanding this basic kind of like barometer check with you of head, heart, and house as an individual really helps you understand yourself first. And then when you understand yourself first and where you're at in all of these categories and what you want out of your business and where you want your business to go and how it's affecting the three categories here of head, heart, and house, you're then able to translate it over to your employees and your partners, right? So then you just kind of flip the question. If you want to lead your team well and you want to lead your people well, you need to do this work with them, right? So I'm not saying that if you're a founder that has 100 employees, you can dive deep with each single category and area of head, heart, house with your employees, but you certainly should do this with your direct reports, right? But if you're a startup and you're a founder, normally you don't have a super big team. So understanding the head, heart, and house of your employees and your partners is going to give you a much better opportunity to understand where they're coming from and then be able to manage them in a way to get more out of them, right? Because if you understand where they're coming from and they understand where you're coming from, it doesn't mean that your communication style is going to be the same. It doesn't mean that, everything's going to work out perfectly, but you're going to understand you're coming at the situation from this approach. They're coming at from a separate approach. You both know that now you can navigate conversations, motivation, problem solving, and all of those things based on them understanding that key area. So using this basic approach, you talk about what's their approach of going on their head. How do they process information and their personality types and communication styles and educational background and intellect? And then who they are, where did they come from, their individuality, from their heart, what's going on there, their core makeup, what they're passionate about, things of that nature. And then finally their motivation, right? We all have our own personal stuff that we deal with when we shut down our laptops or we leave work from our 9 to 5s, right? We all have other things that are happening, right? You're not going to know every single aspect of things, but it's going to help. So for example, one of my clients, I was going through over the course of the past year, I just had some outside of work issues and stresses that I was dealing with. And I kind of confided in one of my clients, kind of some of the challenges that I was dealing with in my house, right? Not in the head of the heart, but the house was affecting my heart. So I kind of shared that with him. And he was so gracious about it. And we were able to kind of work a few different things out where he was like, hey, if I could maybe take this off your plate and we can translate it here, would that help you in the short term work through some of these issues that you have going on that were not business related, had nothing to do with the way that I was consulting with his firm. It just had to do with more of like a time and resourcing aspect of things. And him being able to do that for me created just this like closer relationship where we were able to share things with each other that helped us understand each other more. And we're talking about like a contractor and a leader, not even a founder and an employee. So there's so much benefit in really understanding where your team is coming from a head, heart, and house standpoint. So working your team through this process, and this doesn't have to be like, hey, we're gonna have a full day offsite, we're gonna do all this. It could just be through basic conversations. You're not gonna figure this all out in a day, but over the course of 2, 3, 5, 6 months, a year, having conversations, asking your team members about certain things that maybe they've shared in previous conversations, shows that you care, shows that you understand. And when you're a leader where people know that you know specific things about them, you ask about what's going on in their life and you show that you care, these people will work much harder for you than they will for their paycheck. And that's the magic juice, right? That's the potion that you want to create an environment where they want to work for the common goal, right? They want to run through the wall for you as a leader because they know you care about them and they care about you. And as we kind of go through this, like, it goes without saying, but we're kind of coming off of the tail end of on COVID, hopefully. But these are just some of the roles that both you and your employees play on a daily basis, right? Parent, teacher, caregiver, spouse, cook, employee, janitor, if you're working from home sometimes, right? Referee, making sure the kids aren't fighting and doing all these things. And there's a slew of other things that you or your employees are dealing with on a daily basis. So if you're able to have these conversations and have an understanding of where everybody is from a head, heart, and house standpoint, you have a much better opportunity of success in that relationship, and as a personal standpoint, but also success in the relationship from a professional standpoint. Because as you know, high performing teams need a lot of things. And if you're a founder of a startup, you need your teams performing at the highest level. There needs to be trust built. The only way you build trust is by actually working at it, right? Make sure your team feels comfortable coming to you with any issues. And then you do what you say you're going to do. Clarity, communications, where the company is and where it's going, right? A lot of times with founders, founders don't want to share, like, hey, my goal is to grow this and sell it. So they kind of hide it. And they say, oh, I don't want to really share. I don't want to be super clear because maybe they're going to go look for another job. Well, if you're clear with people, you can understand, like, hey, these are the things that we're looking to do, but this is the benefit, or this is the experience that we get from this, and this is what you can get out of it. So that's one of the things there. From a balance standpoint, culture needs to involve some activities outside of work. When you're a leader or a founder, you need to create that balance, right? You need to create that flexibility in exchange for that hard work. Again, we live in a world where there's a lot of responsibilities that are happening inside and outside of work. So you got to make sure that those are balanced. You can't ask somebody to work 90 hours a week if you're not willing to do that. And you can't run them 80, 90 hours a week with no break in sight, because they're going to break down, right? So there's that. Teamwork, right? Balance of responsibilities, bringing your team together to triage issues or problems. You're in the startup world, you've got limited brains that you're working with, right? Bring problems together as a group. You don't have to have all the answers, but you can facilitate a situation to create answers for the solution of the problems that we need to triage. And again, working for the common goal, missions with clear goals, like, everyone needs to be on the same page. Company mission must line up with your day-to-day activity. You need to set also clear, both short-term and long-term goals, so you can have a barometer of success. And then finally, fair compensation is something that I have seen a lot of egregious attempts at, basically trying to pay people a really small amount and expect them to do a lot more. Everyone's got shoestring budgets, but if you're looking for people to play a really important role, you need to compensate them fairly. And that doesn't mean that it has to be base salary. There could be incentives, there could be equity, there could be, additional time off, there could be healthcare expenses paid for. There's a lot of different things that need to happen. But when you focus on the house portion of Head, Heart, and House, you're going to understand fair compensation, what people need from an individual standpoint, and what is more important to them as opposed to somebody else. And you can't assume that everybody just cares about money, right? They could care about time off, they could care about flexibility, they could care about healthcare, right? There's a lot of different things that they could do. So these are just a few things that high performing teams need, and how Head, Heart, and House can focus on that. Leading the right way is all about your team, right? It's not about you as the founder of the startup. It's not about you as the business owner. It's about your team, your mission, the collective win that you are trying to achieve, right? You have to be engaged daily with your team. You can't just go to an office and sit there and then leave at 5 o'clock or whenever you leave. You have to be engaged. That Harvard Business Review article I was talking about, where ego is the enemy of good leadership, there was a story there, and it was talking about this European beverage company called, I think it was Carlsberg. I think it's some type of a German beer or European beer. And the CEO, there's a new CEO, and in the production facility, the CEO's office was on the top floor, and they had a setting on the elevator that brought the CEO past all the other floors and directly bypassed anybody on any other floors trying to get into the elevator to get anywhere. So after a few months of the CEO working, he's like, I feel like I'm out of touch with my employees. I don't see anybody, because the way he would interact is, through his travels in between floors and things of that nature, and being in the elevator and coffee talk and water cooler talk and all that type of stuff. So what he did is he basically said, well, I want this disabled, but on top of disabling this setting on the elevator, I'm actually going to move my office without, to a production floor. And I'm going to be out there with everybody else. So people can see me, I can see them, and they can interact with me, because he's like, that's the way I'm going to learn how to lead this team the right way. And I thought that was really interesting and so true with how we need to engage and be engaged with our team. Truly knowing your people and what motivates them is critical, right? We talked about that in the Head, Heart, and House side of things. Making your employees feel like they're part of your vision and your success as a founder is critical. If you're questioning whether or not they feel like they're part of it, they're probably not. You probably have some work to do. So you can get deep there, right? And ultimately, when founders lead the right way, they experience a positive work environment. You'll have loyal team members with less turnover, which is a big deal. Because if you've had turnover in your company, you understand how time consuming that is and truly how expensive that is when you can't keep good people. You'll see faster growth, and you'll have a more profitable business that achieves its goals more consistently. So when you focus on doing the things that we talked about, again, it's a basic concept, but making Head, Heart, and House your own, going in and understanding individually what you can do, and then what's going on with your people, is going to make all the difference in the world with you as a leader. And it's going to help you lead the right way, and you will only see positive benefits from that. So that's kind of the portion from a presentation standpoint of the things that I wanted to go over with you guys today. But me personally, I'm always big on interaction and asking questions, and understand, if you guys have very specific things that you want to discuss, let's take the time now to either triage through some questions or kind of go from there. So I think Emily's going to moderate some of it, or she's going to serve up some questions. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So if you guys have questions, you can, everyone on here has the ability to turn on their video or speak. So you can shout out that way, or you can submit through the chat also. Okay. Questions in writing. And I have a question. I can start it out, but so this is something I ultimately end up getting into a lot of this with my clients, Jason, and there's this constant like push and pull on a spectrum of kind of, well, where is it the company's responsibility to kind of flex and work with someone and adapt to their style and needs, right, versus the leader or the organization, in this case with a founder in a startup, they're probably one and the same in many cases, really, being hard-nosed about what their expectations are, what their needs are, and having someone work well with them. So what would you advise someone if they, ask that question, how much should I really be, flexing here versus staying true and committed to what I need?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think it's truly understanding what the issue or the problem at hand is, right? Because you can't change your entire business because one person needs something very specific that no one else needs. Especially if it's a detractor to your business, right? If it's a detractor to your culture and your business and things like that, there's just some things where you can say like, hey, listen, here's the deal. This is how our business is set up. This is how we have to run it. I realize that the structure of our organization may not be conducive to what you need and how you need to operate. Like if there's flexibility, then maybe you potentially get flexibility. But if there's not, being clear and being direct about that is really important as well. And you could say, hey, listen, this probably may not be the best fit for you anymore then. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, how do we work together to maybe find you something different, where we can offboard you and find you and onboard you someplace new if the business has that ability, right? But I think it's just being clear, because where the issues always come up is when there's not clarity, right? People think, well, right, I didn't know that I couldn't do this, or I didn't know that this was going against company policy, or I never knew I couldn't, work from home all 5 days and not be in the office when we're supposed to have face-to-face meetings, right? Or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Because that's something that we're dealing with, right? I'm seeing it with all my clients. I'm sure, Emily, you are too. Going from this remote environment that was forced with COVID has now actually been welcomed by many employees, and they want to go back to that remote environment. And some businesses can be flexible, others cannot, and some can be hybrid. And I think getting ahead of those types of situations, I know I'm kind of fabricating this like flexibility side of things for this question, but it's something that I've seen very real happen with a lot of my clients, where people are saying like, listen, I can't go back to being in the office 5 days a week. And I've seen the founders and the CEOs and the leaders say, listen, I get that. You've been great with us. We want to be flexible. This is a position that is going to be 5 days a week in the office. And if we can't flex, then let's help you find kind of the next spot, which gives us the time to find a replacement for you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think all that's valid. I mean, it's frustrating, that answer maybe to some, because it's not black and white, but that's the world. But yeah, I think just having a conversation and having it be a transaction, a conversation about what the issue is, and how each person can give and take is important, and not react like in a knee-jerk way. I think it's smart. Yeah.
And to that, I mean, again, if the older I've gotten, I've used this word, right? But like allowing grace, right? Like you have to give grace, and you have to allow grace to yourself, right? Like you're not going to be perfect. No one's perfect. If you're trying to be perfect at everything, you're doing it wrong, right? Because sometimes when you fall down and you fail, it's how you learn. But being aware of these things is really going to be super helpful, right? So I think Chris had a question as well in the chat, which I can.
Yeah, I can read it out for the group in the video. So Chris says, and thanks, Chris, acknowledging that leadership should start at the top, but also that it should not stop there. How do you encourage non-founder, non-leadership type employees to take on leadership roles? Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And thank you, Chris, for that, by the way. It's a strong point, because I think when you're talking about non-leaders, right, you're talking about, and this isn't demeaning in any way, but it's like, call it your production employee or the people that are they're individual producers in the company. How do you create that leadership? And I think leadership in that way is accountability, right? Just because you're not being asked to be a leader doesn't mean you're not accountable to the job that you agreed upon, right? And this is where I see some people sometimes get crooked, right? They're like, well, I'm not paid to do that, right? It's like, it could be very valid, but you are paid to do something. So doing that job very well in an individual production role, and making sure that you're doing what the company is asking you to do, it is a good way to lead. It's being a model employee, right? Now, if you are seeing things that are not going the right way, or there's problems that need to be triaged, even though you're not in leadership, it is the responsibility of every employee in any company to raise their hand when they see something wrong, or they think something is wrong, or they think something can be improved. And I think, to Chris's point, leadership starts at the top. So what the leader needs to do is foster an environment where that non-leader, that non-management employee, has the ability to sound an alarm, or bring up a problem, or ask questions that maybe are sensitive in nature, but it's going to make the company better. So it's twofold. It's as the employee, doing what you were asked to do and doing it well every single day consistently, but then also the leader fostering that type of environment where those non-leadership employees can actually have a voice.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know the specific angle that Chris is taking with that question, but I think maybe even enticing people, obviously you can entice people maybe by like greater compensation and things like that, if people are hesitant to take on that additional level of responsibility or headache with being accountable for other people's performance. But I think maybe even motivating through, communicating to them that if they are a leader in the organization, they'll have a greater ability to make impact too, because it's not just their own efforts that they'll be impacting anymore. It would be their ability to impact the efforts and outcomes of other people, which obviously has exponential impact capability.
For
So,
sure.
um, and I have a kind of question that stems off that, Jason. I don't see any others in here yet. So, I think there's a really good point too. Like, not everyone is meant to be a leader in like the traditional sense of leading people, right? If that's how we're talking about it in this conversation. And I think first of all, that's okay because there's plenty like technical experts that are needed out there, and that's a promotion track for people as well. But I think making sure that as a startup, you understand like there are certain attributes that are needed. And also, yeah, minimally someone needs to want to be a leader of people for them to be promoted into that role. So making sure as you're making those decisions to promote people or create those roles, that those people have those attributes. But if a founder, because they're just in this position anyway initially until they can hire maybe a operations director or something to take on a lot of this burden, if they don't have a lot of these skills that come inherently, which I do see often as well, do you have any quick tips, Jason, for things that they can do? Not that it's disingenuous, but to maybe program things to make sure that they have reminders to take these steps to engage with employees or have conversations.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know about you guys, but I run my life off of a calendar now. Because like I'm the guy that like if it's not on my calendar, but somebody said, "Hey, Jason, do you want to meet at this time?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to." But if it's not my calendar, like I'm the guy that doesn't show up because I've been trained now to just like wake up in the morning and look at my calendar on my phone or on my laptop and kind of see what I have scheduled. So, um, you know, utilize the technological tools to help remind you of things, right? And I mean, it sounds silly, but like I will block off time in my calendar to like make sure I'm taking my wife out for coffee and like going on a date with my wife or like scheduling dinner or calling my mom or like what all the things that I need to do outside of life. I do it not because like I need life gets so busy, right? And we live in a connected and pretty distracted world, right? So utilize those free tools to help you do those things. And if that means that you block off, like I said earlier, maybe an hour or two a week in your schedule and it's office hours. And it's you saying, I'll host maybe office hours on Tuesday from 2 to 3. And then on Thursday from 2 to 3, I'm just going to walk around and talk to people, right? Like I have found, especially for me being a consultant, right? Like I'm not in these offices every single day, but that doesn't preclude me from having to build relationships with people. Right. So when I'm in my clients' offices, part of the reason that I'm showing up is to walk around and say hello to people and have engaging conversations and just create a different level of interaction as opposed to like, oh yeah, there's this dude that's just going to talk to me about how to like sell more. Right. Yeah. Like it's a situation where I'm being intentional by doing that. So the intentionality of blocking your calendar out, don't feel like you're a failure because you have to do that, because it's just a good reminder. And then what happens is if you continue to do that, it's a habit. And then once that habit is formed, you're going to do it all the time. And then once you actually see that habit perform and starts to bear fruit and has positive attributes, you're going to want to do more of it, right? So sometimes you just have to like set it in the calendar to just start to build that habit.
Yeah, a great point. And that doesn't make it less genuine at all. And I think I've coached people on that before, and that's kind of the argument. But the results are the same. It still builds the trust and relationship, and the interactions are just as valuable and genuine. So
and you're like, if you expect yourself to do that, the only way to inspect that is by actually doing it, right? Like you just have to take that step to do it. And kind of go from there. I mean, I serve on nonprofit boards and do other things. So I have to block out time to do those things. So if I don't block out time and then all of a sudden somebody says, "Hey, I need you during this time," it's like, well, that's the time where I serve and I can't do that. Right. So it's organization that actually helps you move faster too.
Yeah. It looks like we have another question from Nathan. So Nathan asks, how do you feel about the modern concept of intrapreneurship? The idea that businesses can benefit from recruiting entrepreneurial-minded folks and encouraging them to be the CEO of some of the areas of the business.
Yeah, Nathan, great question, and thanks for participating. Nathan and I just recently connected on LinkedIn not too long ago, so I'm glad to see you on here, Nathan. It's a great question, and this is where, when I talk about earlier, like the clarity and being open and making sure that like everyone's aligned in goals and things like that is so important, right? Because in this entrepreneurship side of things, like most of you as founders, if you're a founder on this call, like you know that you need people in your business that are going to like own things and go do them without asking you if they should go do it. So finding people that could, that are entrepreneurial minded is huge, right? Because there are so many people out there that think entrepreneurship is sexy, right? It's the cool thing to do. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur now, right? Like not everyone's cut out for it. Not everyone's cut out to be a founder. And the only way to figure these things out is to actually do them. So when you have somebody eager to want to work with you and help do some of these things, it's life-changing when you actually have them step up and do it, because you're like, this is exactly what I want. And maybe they step up and they don't like it. But if you have an open communication with this team member, like, I really like this aspect of it and I really don't like this, that's okay. That's how you learn. And you can respect the fact as a founder that these people are working very hard for this common goal. And also, if you're a founder that's looking to have a short-term exit in a couple of years, like there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm building this product for a short period of time to flip it and sell. There's ways that you can incentivize people through equity. There's ways that you can say, well, it's not equity, but if we sell, everyone's going to get X amount of dollars. Or if I sell, you just got great experience and say that you could be a part of the successful startup that just sold in 2 years. And you were part of that scale up.
Yeah.
All of those are benefits. So just be open with it. And if people aren't on board with it, then you probably have the wrong people. If you've got somebody sitting, if you're looking to sell in 2 years, you got somebody sitting there saying, I'd love to work for your company until the day I die. It's like, okay, well, I hope you don't die in the next 2 years, because that's when I'm looking to sell, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just be straight with each other and know what we're building.
Yeah, to me, that concept, the entrepreneurship concept, just sounds like another word for accountability, which I know you and I, Jason, were chatting about before Absolutely. This starts. But to me, yeah, it doesn't, you can call it that, you can call it accountability, but even if you're not a startup, I think that's a key concept for any employment relationship or employer to have. I mean, certainly different positions have a different level of accountability, right? Where the stakes may be different, but I think setting that as an expectation upfront for anyone you hire, especially a startup with a very small team where you need someone, like you said, Nathan, to totally own like the entire finance function and just make sure like, hey man, like I'm not the expert in the area, but I need you to like make sure that all the boxes are checked there and that we're covered, because I don't know, like that is accountability, which I would say, yeah, entrepreneurship, if you want to call it that.
For sure.
For that function. So I think that would be awesome to set as an expectation for everyone in the organization from a very early stage.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions out there? Don't be shy.
Yeah, and I'll kind of close with this. I think if there's no other questions, there's a lot of people, and you're probably looking at a guy that's talking right now that maybe 10 or 15 years ago would have thought that some of this was fluffy, right? Oh, this is just fluffy. Like I've got business to take care of. So like, yeah. Like everyone needs to like know how everyone feels. Everyone needs to feel good about it. Then we can go. It's not that. It's you. This is a life hack and a business hack and a cheat code to get people to perform more effectively than they're performing today. If you don't have a good relationship with your team, they are not going to produce the same level for you as if they truly knew what was in your head, in your heart, what was going on in your household, and you knew that for them. It is a cheat code for production. So oftentimes people say this is fluffy and this is great, but like, I just need to go run fast and do business. I promise you, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I've ran a company on this for 5 years. And we are seeing phenomenal results because I'm helping instill this in companies. And then when I watch the leaders do this, it takes their business to the next level. So this may sound fluffy, but the results will back it up. I promise you that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jason. And I agree. When I first started working in HR, people talked about engagement, right? Like this is really very much that in some ways. And I would roll my eyes and people would talk about it. And I would think, this is, whatever, fluff. But with all of my clients that I work with too, whenever we start instilling a lot of this work, even in just through small changes, those are the companies that are the most successful, have the least amount of problems and things distracting them from the business mission. And so I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, great. And I threw up on here different ways to interact with me or connect with me or follow me. I mean, I'd love to be engaged with people. So feel free in any way, shape, and form to reach out if we're not already connected on LinkedIn. It's my most active social media site, but I love to link in with new people and have conversations. And I'm really passionate about the Buffalo community, making it successful. So if there's anything else I can help with, let me know. But it's been a pleasure being able to kind of share this with you guys, and wish you all the success.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And I see we have one late question that came in, which,
great.
How do you push 1099s or, independent contractors? I'm sure a lot of startups are using those to fill new roles for the company to grow. I'll just add a little side note there. There's a presentation on Friday about kind of HR essentials for startups, which we're going to cover the idea of using contractors versus employees and a lot of the legal landscape that's changing around that, and why you may not want to consider doing that, because it does inhibit your ability to hold them accountable to certain degrees in a very granular way, and set those expectations. But what would you have to say about that, Jason?
Well, you're talking to a fractional executive that runs a consulting business that does fractional work. And I would tell you that I've been incentivized to help companies grow. And it's been super lucrative for me, and it's been more lucrative for the companies. If you find the right people with the right skill set that have their own businesses and their 1099s and their contractors, and you can get them to perform certain non-managerial tasks for you that wouldn't get you in trouble with any of the HR stuff, I would say look at it, because scalability is important. Obviously, your profits, your business budgets, and all of those things. I mean, a lot of you are running on shoestring budgets. So if you can get sprints in certain areas with vendors and 1099s, I'd say explore it. There's pros and cons to each, but you're talking to somebody that's built a business for 5 years on that, and it does work when deployed properly.
I think you're right. I think the key to that is having them own a function of the business, not necessarily an individual contributor role within like a department that exists within the business, because then they have full latitude to do it how they want, as efficiently as they want, and you're paying them for that deliverable. Yep,
exactly. It's a good question, Erin. For sure.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks so much. Yeah, please connect with Jason and listen to his podcast. It's awesome. And he's totally available on LinkedIn and other platforms as well. You can, if you have some questions, you should just make them public so we can all benefit from the answers.
Yeah. All right.
As long as you're not incriminating yourself. But
great. Well, thanks again for your time. Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And don't forget to sign up for the remaining 2 presentations in the People Track this week.
Absolutely. Take care, guys. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.